What's going on, ladies and gentlemen of Prestige? I have a quick message on this DNA test thing. There are about 3 things I want to cover. I want to cover firstborns. I want to cover women that support that it must be compulsory. And I think there's one more other thing I wanted to cover. Let me see. All right, great. I also wanted to cover what if the babies look like you. Now, in this video, I want to try to address the actual elephant in the room. Ola, are you asking people not to do DNA tests? No. In fact, I encourage it. Once you have that question on your heart, no one is going to stop you from doing it. Okay, let me say it like this. You might stop yourself from doing it, but nothing is going to stop you from the painful process of getting to some kind of closure. It's not going to be easy. Okay, once you have this question, okay, the elephant in the room is this. The elephant in the room is, why is it that people have a hard time asking for a DNA test? There's another elephant in the room. If you have nothing to hide, what is the big deal? That's the other elephant in the room, right? So I know now, so but let's address the first thing. What if the babies look like you? It is very, very true that babies can seemingly look like you, and then you kind of like justify there's no need to answer that question again. That's very true, but the reality is that people, even after a while, they start looking like themselves when they're married. It's true. Well, looking like themselves to who? Well, to the people that keep seeing them together for years upon years upon years, right? So seemingly they start looking alike. But to me, it's not different from people from the east side of Africa all looking alike to you, or people that seems to come from Senegal or Ghana. They all tend to look alike, or all white people seems to think all black people look alike. That's the other elephant room. So the thing is that, okay, the truth is that if a baby looks like you, sometimes it's just that obvious that this baby, right? That's the reality. Like, why do we question stupid stuff just because we're trying to bring things down to exact science? This always never works, okay? The other thing is the firstborns. There's a lot of issues with firstborns. A lot of people did the last knocking before they came into a marriage. They did the with their ex before they came into a marriage. 9 months later, after the wedding, there's a brand new baby, and it's yours, right? So we also have a lot of people claiming that most firstborns do not belong to the husbands. No, you're generalizing. You have fear of enlightenment, progressive nature of the experience of humanity. We're discovering more and more. There's Ayolaju. There's obviously we're learning more and more about our experience. So more people are discovering more information. We have access to information, DNA tests, and things like that. And because that same effect has the effect on, you're now exposed to more information about the evil that men can do, right? Men or women, human beings, evil behavior, of course, right? So now that is creating fear, and now the solution to the fear, let's just find out, right? What's the third thing here? The third thing. So of course the ladies will say, you know what? This is just bad. I heard somebody said my gender can be evil. Let's just make it all mandatory. Okay, I heard somebody say in another video, let's make it mandatory, and then come to find out this person is not married. This person is not really in a relationship. They have no kids. an adult, but nonetheless, they don't really have real life experience of the level of emotions that comes to play when you either have kids, meaning you've created other human beings have come through you, or you are married, meaning you're responsible for other human beings, other adults now, right? And so it's no wonder why they think they can advise, let's just make it mandatory. Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, DNA test is not free. Okay, it's not free, unfortunately. So the question is, who's gonna pay for it? Okay, now it might get to a point, it's possible, maybe 30 years from now, 20 years from now, too many negative DNA tests, paternity tests is coming back, and it's creating danger for the public in general. At that point in time, they might make it mandatory, meaning somebody's gonna pay for it, meaning they'll tax everybody for that. That's the way it works in real life, right? Somebody has to pay for it. So we might find that situation. It might come eventually. I doubt it. If you pay attention to developed worlds, I don't know about in Nigeria or anywhere, they don't come in unless they don't come into your family matters. Anything that's especially heavily emotionally driven, people's family issues, marriage, they don't come into it unless you pay them first. And even at that, they don't enforce. They don't put people in jail for cheating. You can use it as, you can file for separation from people for cheating, but that's about how far you can go. They're not going to put that person in jail. You can file for, a certain alimony, things like that, on the grounds of infidelity or unfaithfulness, stuff like that. But they're not going to push people away for that, right? For specific reasons. It gets very messy. It's very hard to be extremely objective to the point that it needs to be like you can't use quote unquote people's evidence, just them describing their experience, to put people away. It just doesn't work like that, because everyone's experience of the same objective events can be different, especially in terms of how they describe it. So all you have is maybe a lawyer can speak well for you. If you have a very well paid lawyer, and you can afford to keep paying them until they find enough evidence, so, but the point I'm making here is this. When a woman says, yes, let's make it compulsory, but this is particularly against their gender in terms of they're the villain in this respect. The victims are the men. It's a very sad situation. There's no question about that. It's an extremely evil experience for anyone to go through a situation to have raised a bunch of kids and not know that it's theirs, right? At the very minimum, they should be aware that a child is not biologically theirs, even if they choose to father that child, which there's nothing wrong with, right? But at the very minimum, they should be aware of the biological source. So why? Because we care, everybody cares about procreating directly or indirectly. They just, at least the awareness. So we're talking about trust here. The big elephant in the room is two things: trust and emotions, right? When you bring the idea that it's just going to be as simple as, let me just ask her for DNA test, even though we've been married for 5 years. Let me just ask her. She should understand. She has nothing to hide, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Well, it's not that she has necessarily has something to hide. It's about the emotions that will play a part in this, right? It's not as simple as let's just ask. It makes sense on paper, so let's just ask. Like, well, you should ask. If this question is on your heart, you should ask. You should get to the bottom of it. But I also want you to be aware that there are massive consequences for moving madly when it comes to emotions in relationships. If this is a complete stranger, you guys smashed, it's a baby, and you said, well, I'm going to do a DNA test because we weren't together. Well, because we weren't exclusive. Well, we weren't married. I just want to make sure everything is well, right? That conversation will be a lot more smoother. But in the case that we're talking about right now, there's a lot of people that are moving mad to suggest to people to start asking their wife for DNA test. If there's room for this question in your heart at all, I think you should ask for the DNA test. But I want you to do yourself a favor. I want you to write down on paper all the different outcomes of going through this process, the possible outcomes. Number one is, she will say, ideally in a perfect world, she will say, yes, my husband, I understand. It's getting crazy. Our agenda is giving babies to the wrong fathers. And you know, that's a perfect word. I want you to write that down. That's possibility number one. Possibility number two is that she will say, no, you are mad. Are you crazy? Right? Possibility number three is that you've done a good job, that she doesn't even feel safe enough to even say that to you. And she shuts down. She's like, okay, but she actually doesn't mean it. Now she feels like she can't trust you. Okay? Right? Now for each one of those three possibilities, multiply that by two possibilities. Two, right? One, the outcome is that the baby is actually yours. Two, the outcome is that the baby is not yours. You're 99% not the father. So those are 2 times 3. That's 6 different possibilities. You can rewind this video and write it down if you want, okay? And then come up with how you would respond to each one of those, okay? Before you go through the process, okay? Because I'll tell you what, if you wake up one day, you go do the DNA test and you find out that that baby is not yours, right? For all the 3 possibilities, either she said, you're mad, or she said, it's okay, my husband, or she shuts down internally, she said it's okay, but she really didn't mean it. Are you prepared for what you would do in that situation? Or you're just going to, we figure it out when we get there. Do you know what that means? Do you know how crazy that can turn out to be? Are you prepared for that? Because we're talking about deceit here, right? We're talking about deception at the greatest possible for any man, greatest imagination of any man. It's the worst case scenario, it's the worst nightmare that a man can imagine, right? Are you prepared for that? So write all those possibilities down, and maybe even more, right? And prepare for how you would respond, especially if you find out that the baby is not yours. All right. And before you go through that process, I will add this one last thing, okay? Because everybody is suggesting that it should be compulsory, but they're not talking about the emotional part of things, right? Make sure you have support, okay? Make sure you have support when it comes to mental, emotional aspect of these things. Talk to a counselor, talk to someone that can help you through this process. Because again, I would never sit down here and tell you to not do it, okay? If I have to convince you to not do it, you probably should do it, because it's a question that you have, and that question will haunt you for the rest of your life. And just because you have the answer to the question doesn't mean you have peace of mind either. Because somebody said, oh, you know, fine, let's just do it for the sake of peace. No, there's not going to be peace. There's no peace for the wicked. All right. If you like this video, you will like the one shown on the screen right now. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.